Jersey's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion charity has announced its first change of chief executive since the organisation was founded a decade ago. Vic Tanner Davy, the founder and current CEO of Liberate Jersey, is stepping down, while Kaye Nicholson is the one to succeed him. Kaye is a gay woman, a mum, a campaigner for same-sex parental rights, a manager in the finance industry, and current vice chair of the Jersey Community Relations Trust. She also found time to join me to discuss what it was like growing up as a gay woman in Jersey, how times have changed, and what changes still need to be made to ensure we are a truly equal and inclusive society. Why don't you begin by telling me a bit how you became involved with Liberate? Have you been on the board for a while, or is this your first venture into the charity?
No, I'm not involved with Liberate currently. Obviously, I'm gay, so I've always known about Liberate, and I did a lot of campaigning back in 2014, sometime around then, for the equal marriage campaign. I've also done a lot of campaigning around parental rights because I'm a mum, and parental rights for same-sex parents. I've done some work with Heritage on they had a big Pride exhibition. I did some work there as well. So I've always been involved in D&I arena and things that I feel are really important to make sure that minority groups are represented, are heard, and have the same rights.
Brilliant. So is this a way of kind of bringing all that work together and sort of maybe having a bigger platform to talk about that?
For sure, yeah. Because a lot of my work so far, as I said, has been on a voluntary basis, and the work that I've done with JCRT has been very good for reaching out to all those other minority groups as well, being more aware of what's happening on Ireland. So this is a great opportunity for me to start really doing this as my day-to-day.
Fantastic. And so when do you take over? Is it April?
The 8th of April is my first day.
And how will it work? Will you discuss with Vic Tanner Davy, the current CEO, what he's working on and what you'd both like to take forward, and how will that work?
Yeah, so I'm doing a handover with Vic up until that point, and I'm learning what Liberate are looking at, what projects are on, what's in their pipeline, where they want to look to initiate things, and obviously I've got my own ideas as well of things that I would like to start incorporating as well. So it's a mix of both, and I think it'll be a really interesting time of development for Liberate.
Fantastic. And so what are the things that you'd like to bring to it? Is there anything on your mind?
Well, a lot of my background is creative. I'm a writer and I'm a performer. I actually was commissioned by Liberate last year to do a piece in Pride, and I feel that kind of creativity, writing and performing and art, is particularly important in terms of how we communicate across the community, and I'd really like to use that and pull in other groups and other individuals to start using those elements to raise awareness, to build relationships, build friendships, and an understanding across the community of those minority groups between everybody, so we get an understanding of everybody. And I think art and creative pursuits are a great way to do that, so that's something that I'd like to bring into this role.
Oh, fantastic. So is that sort of maybe, I don't know, like a writing competition, or I don't know, various ideas?
Yeah, anything like that. And I'm really keen as well to hear from community members what they'd like to see, what things they'd like to be involved in. And if anybody has ideas, I'm always open to ideas, and particularly if there's kind of creative elements around it as well.
Why don't we talk a little bit about the island more generally? So you mentioned you've done a lot of campaigning in like same-sex parent legislation, things like that, and we've recently just had a step forward with that, because I think Deputy Dublé has brought forward the draft legislation. Is that exciting to see that we are moving forward as an island?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's very, very needed. It's taken a long time, as these things do, because it's a very complex piece of legislation. But it's vital. It's vital for families like mine, for my child to have the same rights as other children without this extra step of having to go to court and apply for a parental order or whatever the case may be. And it's important for him to see both of his parents on his birth certificate. That might sound like a very simple thing, but that how key that is for him to have that. And it's to ensure that the processes are the same, whatever your sexuality is, whatever your family makeup is. The process of going and registering your child is the same. And so, yes, it's a very important piece of work, and I'm very pleased and hopeful that it will go through the Assembly this year and actually come into force.
What do you think when you see the island now? Has it changed a lot in recently, or is there more work to be done in some areas?
I certainly think there's more work to be done. There's always room for improvement. That's why Liberate exists,
course,
right? To raise the awareness and to make sure that we're looking at these aspects and making government aware and working with government, working with other charities. Those are the other areas that I'm very keen to do, is collaboration with other charity groups and organisations. The progress has been great. You know, the difference between now and when I was a teenager, for example, complete difference.
Yeah.
I didn't have any representation as a teenager growing up on this island.
So you grew up in Jersey as a gay person.
Yeah.
So what was that experience like? Was it? I mean, would you be happy to share a bit about kind of? Was that easy, difficult?
It was isolating.
Yeah.
It was isolating.
Is that just because there wasn't a big community of gay people, or was it?
Yeah, and also if you think, you know, I'm going to sound really old here, but I didn't have the ease of the internet, for example, on my phone. Okay, so I didn't know anybody else gay when I was growing up. I didn't see anybody gay on the TV. I didn't read about anybody who was gay. There was very, very, very little representation for me. And so I felt growing up very isolated, that there was something wrong or odd about me. And now, you know, I see accessibility in terms of books, TV programmes, social media, where anybody can go and see people like themselves and see that representation, and that is so important because it gives you that sense of belonging. And that's the other thing that I'd like to feed into the work that I'm doing with Liberate, is really work on making sure that individuals, particularly of minority groups, but every individual on the island, has a sense of belonging, that we feel seen, we feel represented, and we feel that we belong. And the biggest part of that for me is that visible representation, and that for me as an individual has been the biggest shift that I've noticed since growing up. Fantastic. It was that representation.
Yeah, I know when you think about things like Netflix now, you know, all sorts of programs and TV, Doctor Who now.
Yeah, Doctor Who.
Brilliant.
I've been watching that with my son, and he absolutely loves it.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice to see, I think, and to see that times have changed. But there is also work still to be done, as you said. And we did a piece not long ago about hate crime in the island and how we're quite behind because, say, there was something spray painted, which would be considered hate crime in the UK, you know, it might be just considered graffiti here. So is that something you're going to be pushing forward with? Because that Vic Tanner Davy said you'd been waiting for 5 years for a hate crime law and it's still not appeared. So is that something that you're working on?
That's something that I'm very interested in, yes. Yeah.
Have you made any progress, or is it just something?
It's something on my radar. It's nothing that I've actively worked towards, but I'm sure that Vic will be able to bring me up to speed on where they've got to with that as well. But definitely that would be of interest to me, because I've experienced various harassment myself, and I think it's really important that legislation is in place, those protections are in place, and that there's that awareness of those kind of things are not acceptable.
Channel Islands Pride, which is huge now. I mean, it seems to be growing every year. I went myself last year. You know, there's some big acts now that can get involved, and it's just a huge festival. So are there plans for that as well? You know, is there anything that you'd like to change or continue with that?
So Pride this year is obviously in Guernsey. Yeah. We alternate. And as last year was the first Pride that I was actually involved with as a performer. And again, I think it's the way that has grown has been phenomenal. And it's so great. Again, we're coming back to this idea of visual representation and that sense of belonging, community. Exactly. Yeah. And that's, for me, that Pride is very important for that, because it brings together all members of the community. There's that visual representation, there's fun, performing elements, and all members of the community get involved in that. And I'd love to see that again, get bigger and better, of course. It's a great opportunity to celebrate as well, because a lot of the work that we tackle, I would imagine, going forwards is always going to be, somewhat challenging. And Pride started as a right, of course. It's not just there as a party. There are key underlying principles of Pride that are to do, again, with this representation, and challenging homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, all of those hate crime things that we were talking about just then. So I think that's a great visual opportunity and a great celebration, as well as awareness raising. So yes, I'm very excited about Pride as well.
Fantastic. I'm excited as well. I love how it's become one of these festivals where it used to be something that was just for people in sort of the LGBTQ community, but I feel like now everyone gets involved. Which is, some people frown upon that, but I think it's quite nice that some people sort of take their mum and just have a good time.
Definitely, and I think the key thing there is, you know, my argument for everything that is kind of LGBTQ based, okay, we can't just achieve that on our own. As a minority group, we just can't. We need people to be involved. We need our allies to be involved. We need our allies to stand up and talk. We need our allies to be visual. We need our allies literally standing next to us, and that is where Pride is a great opportunity for that, because we see everybody coming together. We see parents coming with their kids and grandparents. My granddad used to come to every single Pride with us. You know, he loved it, and he was proud of me as well in that sense. He was proud to have a granddaughter who was gay. And I think it's vital that everybody gets involved with that, because yes, it's that community building, that community awareness, and it's not just for the LGBTQ community, it's for everybody.
What's the one thing that you would really like to see change about this island?
It's not legislative, but I think just the cultural behaviours. I would like to see more integration, more sense of that community, more acceptance of everybody as an individual, however they may present, regardless of their gender, their sexuality, their disability, their gender identity. Just acceptance of the variety and diversity of life. And that's what I'd like to see. It concerns me when I see barriers. It concerns me when I see divides being drawn. So I would really like, and this is something that I'd like to do through the awareness raising with Liberate, is to really build on that and to encourage people to be curious about each other. That's what I'd like to see. It's a cultural shift.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you from the finance industry, you've come from it. Was that difficult as someone from the LGBTQ community working in that industry? Has that given you a lot of insight into sort of how you'd like to break down barriers?
Yes. Yeah, it has, for sure.
Do you sort of feel like you've learned a lot from that, and that's how you bring your work forward to
Yes, yeah. I've worked in the finance industry since I was 21. You know, I went to university, I studied performing arts and literature, so I was in a very open and liberal environment. And then returning back to Jersey and recognising that difference, because actually I think when I was growing up until the age of 18, I didn't really know that, because that's all I knew. Okay, so I didn't have a comparison. And then when I went to university, that was a bit of a culture shock for me to realise that actually nobody really cared if I was gay. It wasn't really a thing. There were lots of other gay people around. It was great. And as I said, when I was at school, when I was growing up, I didn't have gay friends. I didn't really know anybody else gay, and I felt quite isolated. So then coming back from that environment, you realise the difference. It's probably, I would say, less pronounced now because of my age, but it was definitely there. So yeah, then I went into the finance industry as a 21-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And those kind of attitudes that I was talking about, those very ingrained and default attitudes of some people, I was quite surprised by. So yes, it's given me a good understanding of how some, and I'm not saying all, obviously, because there are some excellent employers out there, there's some excellent companies that have now got, you know, DEI schemes and networks in place, which is brilliant. But at that time, there wasn't anything like that. There just wasn't. And I did experience various forms of prejudice, and so I'm aware that is potentially still rumbling underneath, hopefully not as prevalent as it was when I was younger. But that's something that I did in my last 2 places of work, was I established networks, diversity and inclusion networks, because I didn't see that representation happening. I didn't feel that there was that understanding of what was really happening. And I'm not just talking about at local level with me, because I was working on the same-sex parental rights legislation, and a lot of people that I work with didn't know that wasn't the case, that I couldn't have, my son couldn't have both of his parents on the birth certificate. They just weren't aware of that. But there's also the wider context, and actually I was encouraged by my manager at my previous place of employment, because I remember being very scared actually when Trump was elected and seeing the rhetoric and that shift, very, very hard shift in attitudes, particularly towards minority groups. And I remember saying to my manager at the time, this is really worrying me, and I feel quite powerless about it. I don't really know what to do about it, but it is worrying me. And she said to me, well, do something about it. Set up a network to educate people, make people aware of this kind of thing. And that really spurred me on. I thought, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And so I did. I set up a network and I got some funding. I had to do a presentation to my board and got funding for things. And then I realised, I can make a difference here. This is something that I can actually tangibly feel that I'm doing something about it. And it's a bit of taking that power back, which when you feel as a minority person either oppressed or ignored or silenced, that's very empowering to feel that sense of doing something and making, maybe, hopefully, a difference. And that's something that I did with, as I said, in both my current work and my previous place of employment, and it worked really, really well. And I had lovely feedback from people, mostly people saying, I didn't know XYZ. To have that awareness of certain issues as well, that I just think if it's not kind of a big media piece, people aren't necessarily aware that there are certain things going on that are affecting minority groups. When I set up the network more recently at my current place, I had somebody come up to me at a social event, and she said, you run the diversity network? And I said yes. And she said, you wrote a piece on our kind of social work program system. She said, you wrote a piece to recognise Bisexual Visibility Day. I said, I did. And she said, thank you so much. I've never had anybody do that. I've never seen that in her place of work. She'd never had that recognition. And I think particularly for bi women, they're often more marginalised as well. And so for her, that was a really important thing. And I thought, great, that's done something. That's had an impact on somebody. And she felt a sense of belonging from that. And so that's what I'm trying to achieve on a greater scale with Liberate. That's my goal, is for people to sense that belonging and have that representation.
Businesses now as well have realised that diversity and inclusion, it's not sort of a chore like I think some people pretend it is. It's actually an asset to your company to bring people who have diverse mindsets and have different opinions and thoughts and know different things about the world.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely, 100%, yeah.
And I feel like you've definitely seen that in your sort of professional life and also your personal life as well.
Yeah, across both spheres. I think diversity generally in life is such a great thing, isn't it? Isn't it great to see the variety of people that live on this planet with us and share experiences and seek to understand and relate? Even if those people you're not personally identifying in that way with them, as in you wouldn't identify as gay, but it's accepting and respecting others' identities and others' feelings. And I think it just makes the world a far more interesting place with diversity.
Thank you to Kaye Nicholson, and thanks for listening to the Bailiwick Podcast. Keep up with all the latest news by visiting bailiwickexpress.com or reading our sister publication, the JEP. More next week from me, Kelly Frost, and the rest of the team.